Andy Richmond's handicap forensics session coming up. And we're going to take a look, first of all, at the Stewards Cup. One of the big sprint highlights from the glorious meeting. Andy, what is it you like about this particular contest?
For a man who likes 3-mile chases, I think I just like it was a quick death, isn't it? You can almost describe it as that, isn't it? That was has been described as that before. But no, I think it's a fascinating race. There's lots of angles in, and I've just tried to sort of take it apart in sort of 3 or 4 ways, not particularly in a trends-based way, but just find a few angles in and possibly just even destroy a couple of myths as well. But just ask a few questions, get people thinking about the big meeting, which is only a week or so away now, and it's a magnificent spectacle when they come over the brow of that hill. I'm just glad I'm not the man at the end of the microphone calling 30 runners over the brow of that hill. Richard Hoyles, who's usually on the microphone, I'll tip my hat to you now.
Yeah, absolute cavalry charge as well, but not devoid of quality along the way. Let's start leafing through our questions, and the very first one, will it be fine and dandy? David Nichols, of course, so associated with big sprints north and south of the border. How is his recent record?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, obviously he had evens and odds win in 2010. Tax-free was second last year. He sent a battalion out last year. But overall, I think if you look at his record, he has awful lot of runners in it, and you wouldn't have made much money backing them all. And I just sort of looked at the 9 entries this year, and I just wonder whether he's just slightly on the wane in this area in the Stewards Cup. And that was my sort of first point to batten up. We can see evens odds winning in 2010 here. He's had a fine, he's had a good record in the race, lots of placed horses, but you just wonder whether he might actually be aiming to talk about another big sprint handicaps at the Air Gold Cup this year, where he's got a far better record, and just the overall quality of his team this year just doesn't seem to be quite there. Victor de Liefar is the best this year. He's rated 92 along with Tax-free. They're only just about going to scrape into the race this year, and I just wondered whether he's quite got the quality or class of horse this year, and that he'd have a better shout in the Air Gold Cup, as we see evens odds win in 2010. Evens and odds was second in the previous year, and we'll come on to a little question we've got about course form later on. So is Dandy just a little bit on the wane in this particular race, is my first point to make, and I think he is.
I think he might have some fairly handicapped horses, though, come the end of the season, if horses like Victoire are suddenly on the way back. Is it easy to, given that the sort of band of ratings on offer, is it essentially a race where you can lay one up, you can prepare a horse for it? Because the idea of a horse rattling through the handicaps and then arriving in that contest is probably quite difficult to do, given the markers.
Very difficult to do, and very difficult to time it right to get into the handicap. You're probably going to need to rated upper 80s, and you might not even get in then, or even lower 90s, and that is where you're going to be. And it is, as we'll see from a question we got up in a moment, there is a race that brings up a lot of strength in depth as well, and it's a race that you can pay to follow, and horses go on and do an awful lot with. That was just the first point about Dandy. Has he quite got that focus on the race this year? And I think he might switch to the focus into the Air Gold Cup this year, rather than having a dip at the Stewards Cup. Those other consolation cups would be well worth keeping an eye on. In fact, he's got a horse running this afternoon, Amenable. He's entered in the Stewards Cup. Might be teeing him up for one of those other Stewards dashes that we see down there in the derivations of the Stewards Cup.
He's got a good record in that 2-year-old handicap, the nursery down at the glorious Goodwood meeting as well, so keep your eye on those declarations. On then to question 2, and that relates to the quality of the contest as a rule, the strength and depth. We see so many group race performers, Andy, emerging from this contest down the years. This
is the point I want to make. When Hoofit's not quite gone on this year as I would have expected, but yet we all live in hope. Us Hoofit fans live in hope. But arguably last year, and we can relive Hoofit coming out of the stalls there in these pink colours. We'll relive that while I just talk over this, and you can watch that. I know this was Tom O'Ryan's favourite race from last year, but it's arguably one of the hottest handicaps of the year, and well worth following in terms of subsequent winners. There were 12 individual winners came out of the race last year. Now you could argue, yes, it's a hot race, but it's well worth taking a look in form. And there's horses like the 24th last year, which was Tiddlywinks, went and won the Tokepole Stakes at Goodwood, that's a Group 2, and the Greenland Stakes at the Curragh, as Group 3. The 6th was interesting last year, Pastoral Player. That won the Timeform Jury Stakes, which is now known as the John O'Gaunt Stakes. That was a Group 3. And of course, we've had other recent winners in Group 1 level. Patavalian, Borderless Scott back in 2003, 2006. They've gone on to win at Group 1 level. Of course, Borderless Scott would be the one horse that we probably all associate with the Stewards Cup. So I think it's one of those races. Strength in depth, yes, it has. It has great quality and great content, and it's well worth taking a look at and following very, very strongly, not only through the rest of this year, but even into early next year as well, because I think horses gain from this and they go on from this and learn a lot from it.
And way back when, of course, runners like Superior at Premium, ridden by a future professional star as well. Traditionally, down the years, it's got a rich history of depth and quality.
It's got class written all over it, and not only in the front four. Take a look at those back in the field, which, without going into the draw, and it's probably more where there's pace these days, it's just take a look at the rest of the field. Horses really do come on from here. There's lots of strength in depth. It's always one of the races that I sort of mark down and put into my whole place where I follow all horses and really mark the form up. I think it'll be strong again this year. It looks a very, very strong renewal again this year.
So that's form. What about fitness? This is something we're going to touch on next. It might surprise you, but a recent run is par for the course. It's a norm. Horses coming into this race fresh and off a break don't tend to have a good record.
They don't, and the question there is fitness freaks. And yes, it does pay. You want a recent run. The sprinters, they like to be kept on the go. The majority of the winners have run within 42 days of the Stewards Cup. So don't let a recent run put you off. And in fact, 3 winners, and I'd argue 3 of the best winners, Hoofit, Jenke, Pivotal Point, all ran just a week before. Momentum coming into a race is very, very important. And the point is here is Cape Classic, who at the moment is anti-post favourite, not guaranteed to get in the race off a mark of 89. This is Cape Classic winning the maiden last year, a race that worked out really, really well at Salisbury. Wins it pretty easily. Willie Haggis, who's got a decent record in the race, not as good as the man we're going to come and talk to about him. But the point about Cape Classic is hasn't run since Windsor, which was well over the 42-day limit. Now has entries this weekend at York and Newcastle and on Sunday at Pontefract. Now, a lot of people will see that as a disadvantage if he runs, but I think it's an advantage. A recent run is always an advantage, and that would be a further tick in the box for Cape Classic. It's now rated 89, probably just about going to squeak into this race, and that is one important point. Recent run, big tick in the box in the Stewards Cup.
So, despite the declarations for Cape Classic, William Haggis has been thwarted by the weather and opportunity over the last 4 weeks or so. So keep an eye on his engagements this weekend. And interestingly, we touched about the sort of ratings band. It's not necessarily. I mean, I think fitness and form, but it's a difficult race, I think, to sort of plot your way through the year in terms of getting to it.
It's a difficult one.
Who turns up in the best form?
Yeah, it's one of the difficult one to arrive at, just in the right sort of form and just to get in on the right sort of mark. And you could be clashing with some very, very classy pretenders these days, as we see in most of the top sprint handicaps these days. People do run horses with big weights off big marks, and they can improve as well. There's not that leap out of handicap company into group company can be made as well. And there's a horse I'm going to pick out later who I really do think can do that.
Shows you what a great job they did with Hoofit last season. In a sense, you wonder if it's the sort of race who just turns up in the best sort of form on the day.
Yeah, it's one of those, and where the pace is. There's lots and lots of conundrums, but I think there's a few horses you want to put a few ticks in the boxes for. Mine would definitely be a recent run would be one of the real strong factors for me, and certain trainers as well.
Well, there is a trainer who has an outstanding record from limited ammunition and darts, and that is James Fanshawe. Whatever he sends to the race, it tends to be fantastic. Whether it's Frizzante, Zidane, that's a certain family that he knows inside out, and they've got Stewards Cup previous.
Well, we'll go the last 10 years. Just had the 4 runners. We'll go Frizzante, 4th in 2003, Ferenzi, 3rd in 2006, Zidane, the winner, 2007, and Max Power, who was arguably a little bit unlucky last year, in 2011. So I make that 4-3-1-3, just the 4 runners. This year, Max Power is in there again, but here's Hallelujah winning over course and distance. Now she was probably the most least exposed runner in the field, racing on the outside of the field throughout. Smart change of gear, real smart gear change. This was off a mark of 83.
Look at the royal colours bobbing and weaving in behind. That's Free Verse, who came out and won at Newmarket's July meeting for young Brendan Powell Jr. in some sort of style. So there's a degree of solidity about that form too.
There certainly is. That gave it some nice solidity, but it was the way she quickened up, and I just thought she had real potential to develop into a pattern class sprinter if maintaining this type of progression. You see her quicken up way on the outside there, and just there was a little bit left in the locker, but it's the record of James Fanshawe, and if he goes two-headed this year with Max Power and Hallelujah, I should certainly be wanting to have a few pennies on those two.
Keep an eye on Hallelujah then to try and make it a 3 out of 5 for James Fanshawe. Now, we saw a runner there with some course experience, which leads us on to our next question regarding course form. How significant is it? Does it tend to play a part? Is it an advantage? A necessity?
It's not a necessity, could be an advantage, but when you look back at the course form of the winners, and you think, on an idiosyncratic course like Goodwood, do you think they'd need to find their feet? There's very, very little preceding form for all the winners. I mean, Bond Boy probably had the most, the winner in 2002. He had a previous Goodwood form of 5.22. Padavalian had form on undulating tracks. Pivotal Point had no previous Goodwood form. Gift Horse 2005, go back to Dandy Nichols, try and link it all together. Won at Epsom the race before the Stewards Cup, so you could argue there's a little bit of undulating course form there. Border of Scott was second, Zidane no course form, Conquest was fifth, Jenke no course form, Evans and Odds was second in the previous year, and Hoofit had never experienced. So whilst it is an advantage, a small advantage, I wouldn't go overboard about it, and I think people do actually pay a lot of attention to previous course form at Goodwood and it being an idiosyncratic course. There we go, there's the graphic of that to prove that. No previous course form, and you would think that on a course like that it would prove to be an advantage, but horses seem to go there, handle the track, and I was looking for undulating course form as well. There's not much there. A well-balanced, top-class horse, and they are usually top-class horses that you win this, can handle most courses, and they certainly do at Goodwood. So whilst it's a small factor, it's not an overwhelming one.
So 5 of the last 10 years hadn't even been there, and only 4 of them had actually been placed previously. So it's not a negative as much as anything else. What about potential horses that you are interested in? You touched on Hallelujah there. I know there's one you've got on your radar.
Alban Star has been on the radar all year, this horse. Ran a terrific race in the Wokingham. And this, last time out, was a race I was really surprised he actually won, because this was virtually a match following the defection of Doncaster Rover. They did go a decent gallop here, but Alban Star was right there to the closing stage of the Wokingham, ultimately finishing behind Marash Music. But he was worse off at the weights here. But Jamie Spencer, probably the right sort of jockey booking here, always looked like they were going to come out on top. And I just thought it was had the look of a top-class sprint handicapper, this horse.
There was reaction to this performance, and it was a dividing reaction. There was some that said it was a performance of style that promises of something else. Others said it lacks substance. He's overrated on the strength of that.
I don't think so. If you look back at his form earlier in the season, there's plenty of good, really good form there. And I just think he needs a really strong, powerful gallop, and to be able to hold him up to the last minute. I think, if anything, I thought, and I'm in the 4 camp, that he actually overcame the odds there to win in a race I didn't really expect him to win. He's been on the radar all year. I'm going to keep going over the cliff with him. So
follow Alban Star, follow Fanshawe, and keep an eye on Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Well, Hallelujah and Alban Star, Hallelujah and Fanshawe are the two that go together. Okay, you could probably afford to throw a few shekels away on Max Power as well, but Alban Star's definitely the one for me in the Stewards Cup. Don't go overboard about course form, and just, well, maybe Dandy Star's on the wane. He might come back and prove me wrong, but I think he just is in the Stewards Cup. Some of those consolation races, but I'd rather be with him in the Air Gold Cup up here in Scotland in September.
Andy Richmond's take then on the Stewards Cup. Of course, you'll see it with us live, the big handicap at the end of Glorious Goodwood Week on Saturday, live on Racing UK.